Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Most disregard things prioritized relevant by seekers understanding energy dynamics. We are able to manifest miracle intending focus, and yet few comprehend the potential latent in eclipsing thought with the absolution of mind. Dreaming self into being, few realize personal responsibility, accountability in determining reality, the manifestation of darkness or light, black or white, joy or fright. Choice fuels the complexity of polar opposition, dividing the spectrum of attraction and retraction. Interest persuades, resulting consequence. The world is a reflection of our collective intending, a projection of our free will capacity to love or hate one another. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. And I thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. I do have as guests with me my friend Liz McGee. Tell you a little bit about her, but she's going to be covering over the next 2 hours the lost tribes of Israel, as well as the particular focus of which I am very fond of the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, or the children of promise and those of perdition, the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, the wise from the foolish virgins. Liz has been a Christian for 35 years. She's also the owner of a bookstore and has been a minister to the body of Christ for a very long time. Studies end-time Bible prophecy, and has been led by the Lord to a lot of this similar discernment as I have and as many of you also share, and has been studying the extra biblical books, especially in reference to the Hebraic roots of the people and the various seed lines. As I had mentioned previously, the children of Cain and the children of Adam. And she's also been teaching insights on a local TV station, Prophecy for the Last Hour. And her website is lizbethmcgee.com, LIZBETHMCGEE.com. And I would also say that she is very talented in regards to being a watercolor artist. And so, Liz, I appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. Why don't you give a shout out to the listening audience?
Well, Zen, thank you. That was great. I don't know what to say. I never really heard somebody give my whole bio like that before. So thank you for having me on the show. It's really an honor and it's a privilege, and I can't wait to get in some of the meat of what we can really talk about here.
Oh, yeah. And, I appreciate the friendship and for you reaching out to me and, the dialogue that we've shared, the conversation over time. And I believe that, since we are the last generation, that many people are being led to similar discernment in regards to there actually being a physical bloodline lineage and physical seed children of the devil here upon this planet, and its connections to the New World Order and the matrix of control that's been instituted and basically, forcefully, all children are forcefully indoctrinated into it. And so a lot of people are not accepting the regular, that's just the way it is. Don't ask this or that question. Just that is the way it is. And so people want answers. It's not any good for them anymore. They want to know the deeper secrets of what's really going on. And so why don't you tell us first a little bit about yourself, and also, your contact information, your Facebook or email, people, because I know a lot of people are interested in the lost tribes of Israel, right, as far as the Hebraic roots, things like that.
Right. Well, thank you, Zen. Sure. Well, I have, I've been a Christian for 35 years, and then the whole part of my life before that, one of the things looking back is I really do see the Lord has been in control, and the way he has engineered circumstances and experiences and things that have happened to me to bring me to this place of understanding. So, all praise does go to Yahweh, because, he loves us, and he will go to great lengths to get us to truth, understanding, discernment, and all of this. And then, again, by being on the show is great because, when I first started to see, and I always use that word kind of see in a seer sense spiritually, with spiritual eyes, what the bloodlines, I was going, oh my gosh, nobody ever taught me this. What is this all about? And then looking for other people out there who might have seen this, and that's where I found you and, Dr. Joy and others that have come to this discernment. So I feel that was a very great comfort. We're not alone, and God really is raising up a great army of people.
Right. I've noticed that too over the past, recent few months and years. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. But my personal testimony, when I was saved, I do want to just give a really quick testimony, because I think it's kind of interesting. There were some little pieces of it that really relate to this. But
okay, hey Liz, I'm going to ask you to go slow too.
Okay.
Remember, take deep breaths and take your time.
I know.
All right.
I have a passion, but I was quite a lost child, so to speak. In my late 20s, I was searching for truth, tremendously searching for truth, but in all the wrong places. And I was starting with my roommate. We were going to psychics. That was sort of a phase, because I wanted to know about my future, right? Well, she came home one day with the name of a new psychic to see, and we made an appointment with this lady, but she was not a psychic. She actually was a prophetess, a true prophetess of the Lord. And, of course, we didn't know the difference. We just thought she was going to give us some inside scoop. When she started to prophesy, which instead of giving me a psychic reading, she actually prophesied, and she said that I was going to meet a guy named Paul in a bar, and that he was going to witness to me about Jesus, and that it was going to be the most important decision of my life. And, she was kind of pleading with me to listen. And in my mind, I was completely starting to turn her off, because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this lady's a Jesus freak. What am I doing? But, of course, that did stick with me. And she said a lot of other things. She talked about how she could see two warring angels on either side of me with swords drawn. And I really believe in the sense of, that's biblical. We have on the left shoulder and the right shoulder this whole idea of two angels that are fighting for our soul.
Right.
And she told me a couple things like how I had this ability. This is something that is only in the last 5 years I've come to understand, but she said that I have the ability to see and understand everything. And I was like, I had no context for that, so I kind of stuffed that. But lo and behold, 3 months later in a bar, I met a guy named Paul who started witnessing to me about Jesus. So it was so crazy. And he started by talking about the New World Order. He started by talking about the book of Revelation and about how we were going to go to this one world government and about how the banks, they were going to consolidate. And he started giving, and at the time in my life, I was going out with someone who was a banker who was telling me the same thing. He was telling me, this is in the early 80s. This is how the banks were going to go from 500 banks. he started telling me how the world was really controlled by men at the top. This is the banker guy telling. He said they're real, people are like really little puppets. It's all orchestrated, it's all controlled, and I had no context for what he was saying. Mm-hmm. So when this guy started telling me it's in the book of Revelation, I started thinking that's impossible. But as he witnessed to me, the Lord really started working on my mind in the sense that I'm thinking, could it really be true that the Bible and prophecy is true? And I just, one thing was when I really went in this moment of time, and a lot of people had this experience as born again, when I really started getting closer to this, honing in on Jesus, thinking, he really is the guy. And then I started to get a fear of the Lord, like, oh my gosh, it really is Jesus. And then I went into faith, and I really went into, oh my gosh, it really is Jesus. He is the truth I am looking for. And I had to, because it was like a light bulb went off in my brain, a literal flash of light enveloped my whole mind. And I just felt like the Lord said, turn the light on. And from then on, I think I was home. But the interesting was the warfare that ensued in my life in the next couple of days, and especially that night of the war. I don't think Satan wanted to give up quickly this quote-unquote new soul for the Lord. And there was tremendous warfare. So I can, a lot of these things, I wish more people could understand how real this stuff is. I guess I've always been a little more, I don't want to say susceptible, or open to spiritual warfare and kind of discerning what's going on. So I just thought that was sort of interesting. So the Lord, I was really set up for the concept of the last days. I've always felt, and this gets into a lot of visions and dreams and words, everything that the Lord has had, that I would be alive in the last days.
Well, I think it's been similar for a lot of us, and bringing us full circle back to what is the truth. Because even for myself, I was a wanderer and a seeker since I was a very small child, and had a yearning to know the truth and to come to understand God and the creation. But I wasn't brought to the truth that the Most High had a son until way later in my life. And after I had been 20 years into the New Age and studying all, because it was in the 80s that all of that came to light, and there was all the movement, the New Age, and all that wisdom, and all these new teachings and information just flooding into the consciousness. And so, yeah, I think the path and the way, even though it's individual and differentiates between all of us, that there are similar, steps on the rung, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I love to hear people's testimony and the ways that Yahweh, that he does individually know us so intimately.
Right.
And it was a perfect setup that I had that I knew this stuff was going on, but I had no context for it. But in the last 5 years, what I wanted to say in terms of the bloodlines, what God has done late in the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, in this preparation for the final stage, and where now I have an understanding. Zen, I just want to say, Sharice, I won't jump ahead of myself, but I started out with 3 things that the Lord did in my life, which I think are kind of relevant, because about 5 years ago, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I had this, I was gripped with this unbelievable fear, and I was in this thick darkness and in an evil that I was incomprehensible to me, that I didn't know existed. And I felt like the Lord was revealing to me the first time that the level of evil that's on the other side, which most Christians are just really, have our head in the sand and are oblivious to.
Right.
So that was kind of a wake up. And then I had a prophetic dream after that, where it was like, I won't go into all the details. What at the end, when the final thing was, is that like the Pandora's box had been opened, and I had this sense of, out of this, oh my gosh, everything out of hell and Hades was just coming out and just blowing. Every hybrid, every imaginable demonic spirit came out of Hades with such force that it just blew away everything in its vicinity. And I was holding onto a rock for dear life, but managing to hold on. And Pandora's box is now, understanding this whole world. That I just feel we are so close to going into the twilight zone.
Right.
Oh
Yeah,
my.
one of the things that interests me too about your testimony is that, a lot of people, even though they come to know some of the deeper aspects of the Bible, um, many are hard pressed to incorporate the New World Order and the inner workings of these secret societies, the conspiratorial side of, like the war on terrorism, 9/11, things of that nature. And in my mind, that's like at least half the equation, because if you don't understand that, you really don't understand the modus operandi of the powers, principalities, the rulers of darkness, and the way that they are working covertly from the shadows.
Right. And I call that their boots on the ground. I mean,
Right.
this is what God was showing me with the evil. There are boots on the ground, people that so many people just think, oh, it's principalities and powers. It's these things that just kind of float around. We don't really
Right.
have any firm grasp of it. Oh my gosh, it's available for people to truly and completely, totally take the veil away and really see what has been going on and is going on. And I think that that's a part of the plan God has for Satan's demise.
Right, absolutely.
But the last part of this, and this is what led to the bloodline revelations, was I won't go into that whole story, but I have this Bible. It's an old Bible, like from the 1800s Bible that I got one time that I have always kept because it was just a very sweet Bible. But it had all these little pressed flowers in it. But then one day I started noticing there were all these little verses that were circled, and I started to think to myself, it's almost like there was a message in this thing. We're all so different and we're all so weird. I mean, this is really something the Lord I really feel has used in my life to kind of help me along the journey. Because sometimes you just don't know where you're going. You just got to I'm following you, Lord, but I have no idea.
Mm.
So anyways, there was a verse in this that I knew was my coming out verse. I don't know how else to say it. This was my life verse, that if I could ever unpack this one, this was my message. And it was of all things, it was in Exodus, where just when Moses is to go into Pharaoh and to say, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. So one day, after all, you had the dream and a lot of things were going on, and I sat down with the Lord. I said, okay, God, I'm going to unpack that. And I sat down in the morning and I opened up the computer. I said, I'm going to look up Israel. I'm going to start to do some Bible research because, whatever. Israel's my first. That sounds like a great phrase. And I was like, I guess I know what it means. Well, then after 14 hours, I got up from the computer that day and I was never the same, because that's when I came into the understanding of the two houses. And I was like, oh my gosh, as Gentile Christians, we are about some of the most lost little sheep on the planet. We have no idea who we are. So that I think God led to me first the bloodline, or how he's worked this with the seed of the woman, but then then I started seeing there's another bloodline in this thing. There's another vine that was planted. There's another seed growing. And then I started to dig deeper, and that's when I kind of came in the understanding of the whole seed of the serpent. Right. So Genesis 3:15 is absolutely, it's as literal as you can get in a verse, really, but we just don't really understand it.
Right, and a lot of people think that, and they understand the Bible in this way, that they think it's all just spiritual, and that people that are evil or have turned away from goodness are the real children of the devil, the spiritual children of wickedness. But what is really important to understand about Genesis 3:15 is that there are literally children of evil that are born into wickedness and inclined to murder, rape, pillage, and plunder, much like Cain and killing his half-brother. And they want nothing to do with goodness. And these loose-knit groups, these secret societies that are working in tangent for the New World Order, they are perpetuating the most abominable acts of evil, so much so that it's just beyond our imagination or ability to comprehend and wrap our minds around. Go ahead.
No, and that's exactly what the Lord showed me in the dream of evil. And it's not our fault in a lot of ways, because look at, basically, we are just, for all our dysfunction and fallen nature, just good Ephraimites. I mean, in the sense of, we can't even imagine that kind of evil. It just doesn't even enter our consciousness. This is what we need to understand. The wicked that are about to come into judgment, these people, they are so wicked. Hell is too good a place for them, I think.
Yes, well said. Absolutely.
Oh, I can't believe it. So this led to me, when I started to see that, because what I feel like I'm a little, quote unquote, my areas that I've just really dug deep. I feel like I have a kind of a broad understanding, but where I've gone deep is in the concept of the seed and meaning offspring. It is a word you have that is descendants. So you have descendants, like you said, 2 total lines of descendants, and then you have is genetics, because I look at everything now in terms of genetics, and I look everything now too, because I believe that the keys to the kingdom, this is what one of my points I want to make, that the esoteric, and this is another thing, Zen, that most people don't understand, and that you've been expert at bringing up, there really is esoteric sealed knowledge that have been held by very few, and both sides have had it. Right. And this is one of the, so what I think a little bit is going on today is that one thing, the keys are being restored, or I really believe Jesus said, I'm going to speak to them in parables, which is a way of just kind of couching the thing where you're not really going to get the deep meaning, just sort of a surface understanding. But in Hebraic, so one of the things is, just let me say, I think anybody you have to start reading all of the extra biblical books.
Right, I agree.
In order to get any kind of understanding. And I tell people to start with the Book of Jasher, and because it's just great reading. It's just a great read. And there's another book out there I want to say is called The Legend of the Jews, to get an understanding of the seed of the woman, we'll call it, that bloodline through history. The unfortunate thing that's happened to us is, well, anyways, this book is called Legend of the Jews. It's by a rabbi at the turn of the century, Louis Ginsburg. He wrote a whole compilation. It's just about everything in Hebraic thought in one book, and it's fascinating reading. It's a little more in-depth even than Jasher. It's really interesting, and it's even prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls. But reading those will give people a big eye-opener to how big this history is. But Zen, I'm sure you will agree with me that it's crazy to put 2,000 years of history, which is what we have, in the first 5 pages or 10 chapters of the Bible, to the call of Abraham. Like the whole story of Nimrod. What I'm trying to say here is most of the history before Abraham is so edited in our text, it's almost impossible to get a full understanding of really what was going on, especially in the days of Noah and in the days of Nimrod. So if you just stick to the first 5 chapters in your Bible as written, you just don't have enough information. Right. Now, it's just now that was not the intention or the way. I think that I think there's an amazing amount of mind control in the fact that they can make people believe that that's all we need to know. I think that's an astounding feat.
And they have perfected that. Because now so many people are like, oh, well, all I need is the King James Version of the canon, and everything that's not included in it is totally unnecessary. And yet, even like with the life of Christ, there's only one passage that refers to even one, as far as his childhood before his ministry, when he was 12 years old, and then everything else is blank. And I mean, even if you just wanted to know about your own Savior Messiah, the childhood and the infancy gospels and all the things that are connected to him and his life, I find that all so very relevant. And being a disciple of Christ, I want to know everything that I can about him and, his early life, and even before coming into his flesh incarnation and the Immaculate Conception, like with the book of Ascension of Isaiah. I mean, all of that is relevant to me.
All of it is. So, I mean, and this is the thing, is that to me, the parable of the virgins, where, when it comes, to show the game's on, when the bridegroom comes and it's too late if you don't have oil. My understanding is that oil represents understanding and the faith that knowledge, because knowledge, in my opinion, knowledge is power. That's why they don't want you to have this knowledge. Knowledge is power. I can't, I always say this, like when the prophetic shit hits the fan, because it's gonna.
Right, absolutely.
It's going everywhere. If you're not prepared, if you don't have the understanding, it's like you're up the creek without a paddle. I can't help you. This is the point. I can't give you my oil that quickly. I can't give it to you. I can't give you what. See, that's why I feel when I had the dream about the explosion and everything came out when the veil was rent and everything came out in the open, because Satan's going to be coming at us with all barrels blazing pretty soon.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So all that being said, I mean, it's the internet. What can I tell people? People gotta stop playing Candy Crush and my gosh, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say in terms of the keys, and this is what I kind of wanted to emphasize in this show, and that's why I appreciate your letting me say this, and why I did feel kind of a burden to push into this a little bit. See, there's so much understanding now coming out about the keys. See, there's the keys to the craft. There's two sides of this sealed knowledge. And we have the keys to the kingdom. But what is really coming out too is how the Luciferian, Illuminati, Masonic, Cainite line, Watcher, Hybrid, whatever names you want to put on this group, and there's quite a few, and they have their keys to the craft, meaning witchcraft. They use all their signs and symbols. It's fascinating to get educated on. Like, we thought that these, what do you call those things? The law, in St. Peter's Square, the obelisks were just obelisks. All the image, when you look at Egyptian icon, all this stuff, that it was just but how they were communicating across time and centuries and culture and languages. But when I say the keys to the craft, what's coming out is how they use trauma and mind control and sorcery and magic and technology and manipulation and murder, thefts, fornications, lies.
Hold on, Liz. Hold on. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. This is Zen Garcia, and you're on Momentary Zen on Studio B, and I have as guest with me Liz McGee. We're talking about the lost tribes of Israel, and with a focus on the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. I want to read this real quick since we're talking about the keys of the kingdom. This is from the Gospel of Thomas, verse 39. It says, Jesus said, "The Pharisees and the scribes have taken the keys of knowledge, gnosis, and hidden them. They themselves have not entered, nor have they allowed to enter those who wish to. You, however, be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves." Now, one of the things as far as the seed of Cain, when Moses had freed the Hebrew Israelites from the bondage of Egypt and had taken them into what would be the promised land before he was allowed to go in, Joshua was sent in to conquer the land. Well, there was a particular people there that had acted like they were from a faraway country, and they paraded as if they were something that they were not, and they were granted reprieve, and Joshua and the other princes of Israel had promised to not kill them, to not wipe them out, as they did many of the other peoples, especially the sons of Anak that were there in the land. But instead, he told them that he was going to make them servants unto the priests of the temple. And so then he found out who they were, and that they were in fact the children of Cain, the seed of Cain. But because he had already, and the other princes had already promised to not wipe them out, they became servants to the Levite priests and took up residence in the temple and around the scribes in the process of serving the priesthood. And it was them getting reprieve in such way that they actually became the Pharisees and the scribes, because they basically took over the priesthood, and then they became the church authority, and they are the ones during the time of Christ that put him to death, that conspired to murder him and to also hide the truth of his being Savior and Messiah, because they even knew way back then, but because they did not want the people to know, they kept that information, as they have the other keys of the knowledge, and also the scriptures and books and wisdom texts that are associated with elaborating and also exposing who they are as the seed of the serpent, and anything to do with the fallen angels and the giants and anything that has connection to them. They have stripped it away and eradicated it and kept it hidden so that we would not know who they are, and that there is literally a physical bloodline and lineage connected as the tares, like Cain, who was of the wicked one, that they are really the children of the devil.
Right, and that is a very good point, because that's the word they're mentioned in the Bible as the Kenites with a K. And this is where one of the things the church has, we have to understand the concept of infiltration.
Right.
We're in a war. I mean, this whole concept, we have to understand we're in a war, and that Satan is infiltrating. This is with Eve. I mean, we'll talk about an infiltration, a genetic infiltrating the genetics of mankind, producing a bloodline. But they are always like their father, the devil. But these people also, when he would change the keys, this is what's coming back, because, see, the Bible is written, this is what I was going to get to. The Bible, when Daniel was told to seal up the information, when they came back from Babylon, it was a whole different kind of, it was a whole different ball game at that point. And God, I consider God to be a great tactician. He's always changing his strategies depending on how the war, what he just looking at the landscape saying, well, Satan, you're doing that. Well, I'm going to go over here and do something that's going to totally bust you in time, so don't worry about it. God has always got way many moves ahead. But these people that became the scribes and the Pharisees, that Jesus said, you are of your father, the devil.
Right.
You are of, you brood of vipers, you offspring of vipers. The word serpent, the word vipers, these are all words that are related right back to Dagon, to Leviathan, to the serpentine bloodline, which we know is the Nakash bloodline.
Yes.
See, the words that are used so much, it's so encrypted. This is what I've begun to understand, that there is a whole level of understanding that literally is encrypted in the text, that once we get back these keys, so I was going to say there's the keys of the craft, how Satan communicates with his own, be it with a hand signal or a wink or in iconology or just in actually bloodline. I mean, there's millions of ways. God has preserved, and this is where the Essenes come in, and this is why Josephus said that at the time in the landscape, he described the people groups in Israel. He said you have three kind of races of people in here, and you have the scribes and the Pharisees, which were not Hebraic in genetics. That's what he was saying. But that the Essenes were one of the last pure-blooded remnant strains in Israel, and they were the keepers of the secrets and the keepers of the encrypted understanding. And it was the Essenes that gave us the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I'm convinced that Jesus was an Essene, John the Baptist, the whole family, their whole clan. The birthright, they're the only group that were really believing and holding on to and hunkered down, believing in the promises and waiting for them. Mary was in Joseph, all these people come out of a total Essene in my community, which I think can be totally proven. So, yeah, we have to understand this concept of infiltration.
Right.
These are the lying scribes and the lying that have changed the word of God. There's tons of verses in Jeremiah and in Daniel and in Isaiah, he's always railing against these lying prophets and lying priests that are changing the word.
I would also say that the infiltration as modus operandi is also written into the protocols of the learned elders of Zion.
Absolutely.
And that this is their way of controlling things from the top down. Even, these organizations that, if they didn't start them, that come to power, they just buy them out. They control them from the top down. And also, one other comment is that I would say that the Nag Hammadi codices are also texts that come from these particular peoples.
Now, so wait a minute, you're saying the Gnostic texts are coming from which group?
Some of those that were hidden are some of the Essene writings.
Oh, absolutely. Then that's the other side of the coin. Once you get through the Dead Sea Scrolls, and a lot of these people, because my belief is that Jesus, after his resurrection, I mean, what is he, people don't think deep enough to me and ask the right questions. It's like, what did they think Jesus was doing with them for the 40 years that he was walking around eating, and he was giving them back the keys?
Right, exactly.
And that's what I believe the Gnostic texts are.
Right, exactly.
Was totally pulling back the veil and giving them, completely restoring the keys to them and giving them a whole understanding. And they just totally and they walked in such power. People have to read these, like the Apocalypse of Peter and the Apocalypse of John, and the power these people walked in. Oh my gosh! The Book of Acts is like such a pale comparison to what we, So it's so great that these texts came back in 1940 at the same time. That's so interesting.
Yes.
But these are the keys to the kingdom that the righteous remnant, those that will, in my opinion, press in to the kingdom will get this understanding, and we are going to reclaim this power and this anointing and we're going to triumph with it. I believe that this is part of the manifestation of the sons of God.
Right. Also, I want to, for those that want to call in, and if you'd like to ask Liz a question, the chat room for Studio B is 301-421-4053, or if you have a question or a comment about any of the things that we're talking about here. All right, continue, Liz.
Right. Now, then one of my points I do want to say, I do have a YouTube channel. The website you get, I'm an artist that's what I occupy till the Lord comes as an artist, as a watercolor artist. But my teachings on all this, I put on a YouTube channel, which is just my name, Liz McGee, and I have over 70 videos uploaded, and I teach about all this. And people that are particularly interested in the two houses, I have a whole series on my YouTube called The Two Houses of Israel and America. See, then this is why, I just have to read this one little quote about how important it is to understand about the restoration of the whole house of Israel. And I believe this is going to be God's major power move to counter what the devil's just about to do. So, like I said, I do have that YouTube channel that people can access.
Yeah, and please go wherever it is that you want to cover for the next hour and 15.
Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to say now, we've gotten about, the keys to the craft and the keys to the kingdom. This is something people really need to understand, that God is restoring. He is opening, this is eyes wide open that you can have, because knowledge is power. And when you start to walk in sight, like you have this 360-degree sight where you can just see Satan coming from any angle. I feel this is what the texts give you. They give you such a huge understanding of this whole battle and such hope. So many times Israel has triumphed over her enemies, so there's no reason for us to be wringing our hands at this time. We just need to get back to our Hebraic roots. So what I want to do is just do a quick lead-in into understanding more about the two houses.
Sure.
Because, Paul said at the end of the age, the church would be full of the doctrines of demons. And I'm like, well, what are people thinking if they've got to reorganize their theology? That's what he was saying. But I want to give just a quick quote here from this idea that, let me just find my place. The promises of restoration that are addressed to the lost tribes in the house of Israel and the house of Judah, right, through the Hebrew prophets, are virtually unacknowledged among Gentile Christians in their constant emphasis on the total restoration of all Israel, meaning all 12 tribes, that says, I just want to say this, there's a whole point in Ezekiel where he talks about the 2 sticks coming together and about the dry bones. Right. These are all kind of allegorical parables of what he's talking about here. But this reunion of the house of Israel and the house of Judah will astound the world and alter world history. This, to me, is going to be God's greatest move. They say that when God pulls this move off, when he reveals the house of Israel and the house of Judah to themselves, and they understand who they are, and they come into the fullness of the promise of God, it says that, and that the acts that they will do, it will make like Moses parting the Red Sea look like child's play. I mean, we have so much to look forward to in terms of having, and this is, again, to the remnant, to the elect. This is where in the book of Revelation, a Laodicean Christian or a virgin that doesn't have oil, it's just not going to cut it, because it's coming down to the wire. You have to pick a side. You cannot be lukewarm. You're either all in or all out. You're going to the mark of the beast or the mark. You're going to be either a child of the devil or you're going to be a child of Yahweh. There's going to be no more. It's a complete separation, the wheat and the tares, the goats and the sheep. This is something people need to really wrap their minds around. And it's been prophesied. But the thing that is really what people need to understand is we're not coming up on the end of the world. This is what people keep, the end of the world. It's not. This Satan is so subtle. It is the end of him. It is the end of the tares. This hybrid race and all those that align themselves. And this isn't just other people. There's watcher angels. There's whole hybrids out there. Because you got to think of genetic infiltration. Satan is created, and we've seen this in the Watcher incursion that you can read about in Enoch. This is what went on in the days of Noah, where they completely re-engineered the whole genome code of most things by and then you get into Nimrod, and it happened again. People need to understand this. So this, let me just try to break this down. You are so excellent at explaining the prior times. There's another thing. The whole time before, we are in this 6,000-year window of Adamic times. But right. There are the Second World Age. Yes. That we can't unpack tonight, but you've done so much on the prior times, which I want to say, when we understand the codes and the keys and the encrypted way God has preserved this knowledge, Genesis 1 is just like the greatest understanding of the prior times. Yes. It's encrypted in there. If you go to, I want to just start in this, if you go to Genesis chapter 2, because one of the things is these translations are just so bad. It's kind of funny. You have to go back to the Hebrew. You have to work every word. If you're really serious about getting to truth, it's a lot of work. Yes. But it says that after he created everything on the 6 days, he says, then the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. And then you flip down to verse 4, and it says, so then this is the account, meaning Genesis 1, this was the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created. Well, when you unpack that, the heavens and the earth, that word vast array, which is the worst translation, is talking about the armies. See, he is giving you in code, encrypted language, all of the armies, the sons of God, all that he created in the 6 days. And then he confirms it by saying, this is the account of the heavens and the earth. Because, see, he created beings celestial. This is what Paul says, all flesh is the same flesh. And then there's celestial flesh, and there's, Adamic flesh. And then there's the flesh of birds, and there's the flesh of animals. He's speaking so esoterically, then it just goes right over the head of most people. Well, it does. And it really was kind of meant to until this is all unpacked. But my point is, the account of the heavens and the earth is the genealogical record. That is the exact same words used in the Hebrew when they start counting the genealogies of Jesus, that so-and-so begot so-and-so and so-and-so begot so-and-so. This is exactly what's going on. He is giving us a complete record of all of his sons or his armies, depending on how, and their genealogies. And this is the first heaven and earth. And then you go back into the end of Revelation, and he's talking about the new heavens and the new earth that are going to come down. So this thing has been so encrypted, but when you begin to unpack it and look at it from the two seed lines, you know, boots on the ground, a whole hybrid race, truly evil, and the enmity, they will constantly be warring against the woman seed, and then you add the celestial armies into that thing. You know, nobody could write this book except God. But anyway.
Right. I was going to say one other thing, too, real quick. What was I? You know, it slipped my mind. Go ahead. When it comes, I'll say it.
Okay, that's fine. Because one of the things, when you really start, you have to get into what's called Hebraic exegesis, which they use a system called PARS. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. And it's PARS, P-A-R-D-E-S, which is an acronym for the levels. And you see, as Gentile Christians, when we threw out all of our Hebraic heritage, I mean, we cut ourselves off. But it's a way that Scripture is encoded. So the first level is the plain meaning, and then there's another level. There's a remez level. There's a midrash level of understanding, and then there's what's called a sod level, which is literally called a mystery level and a hidden level. That's where God hides his mysteries. And when he wants to tell them to one of the prophets or somebody, like Paul got some of the mysteries. That's why Paul says, unto me was given the mystery of the times of the Gentiles, because that's where God hides it. So you have to have the keys to get down to that sod level. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I do remember what I was going to comment on, and I'll say it real quick. That, you know, before I came to the discernment as to there being two bloodlines, two lineages, and that was why, you know, we have Cain's lineage listed in Genesis 4 and Adam's in Genesis 5. I didn't understand why it was that all of the elder patriarchs and all the prophets of old would keep up with all that whom begat whom and this begat that, and why it was necessary to state it over and over in redundancy until I understood that, you know, that there was different bloodlines and lineages, and that the seed of Cain, ever since they had become the scribes and the Pharisees and the authorities over the church, that they were trying to hide the record and to confuse everybody and to mix up all the lineages, that it then made sense. And that's why we have the whom begat whom and the redundancy in all of the Gospels, Jubilees, Jasher. And so then it all made sense.
Yeah, because the modern mind we can't understand because we've been so brainwashed into a whole nother way of thinking. But seed, it's all about seed. Yes. The descendants. There's the seed of the woman, and they knew this. I have to throw this in, Zen. This is for you because I found this in some of my research when I was going through today. Because this was known many times. Because I will want to make the point that our early founders, those pilgrims and those Puritans, they knew this understanding. This I found, this is from somebody who researched a book called The Celtic Church in Britain, The Role of Scriptures, and this is how they taught the early Christians. This comes from a scripture book from 400 AD, okay? And they would ask questions. The clergy would say, who died but was never born? You know, and the answer is Adam. And then they would say...
Hold on, Liz. We'll be right back, and then we'll pick it up right where you just left off.
Oh, yeah. You know what? It's nice to stop the stove.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Studio B, and we come to you live every Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. I have as guests with me this evening Liz McGee, and we're speaking about the lost tribes of Israel, as well as the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. I do want to quickly remind everybody that Revolution Radio is the largest listener-supported, corporate-free, and commercial-free entity radio network on the planet and on the web, and that we do need your support in order to continue bringing forth the information and the truth to you in the ways that we do, covering all the things that we cover without any discretion or any restrictions or any leanings in any way on any particular affiliation to any corporate body or sponsor, and that we keep the information pure in that way, and that there are several ways you can donate to us or purchase items that will help to support the network. Right now there's a special a data disk of all of the shows from your favorite hosts, and that it cover a full year of radio for that particular host, and you can listen to these in your car or your MP3 player on your way to work, not have to listen to these media platforms where you have to listen to 30% commercials, and that this will help us to continue coming to you with two studios 24/7 with over 80 different hosts. And if you appreciate us, which I know you do, please do share what you can, even if it's just the price of a meal. And another great way to support us is to subscribe to the archives, which is only $4.95 a month, and it gives you access to all of the MP3 files from all of the various hosts on both networks, Studio A and Studio B, and that you can then download the MP3 files and upload them to your particular iPod, iPad, whatever, and utilize them that way. And we appreciate you and consider you to be a very intelligent and wise audience. All right, Liz, you were talking about a particular scripture or something of a Celtic.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to throw this out for you because I think you'd appreciate it. That a lot of people will say that the serpent seed doctrine is so new and it's never been taught, but that's not true. But this is from a quote from an early Irish Celtic clergy, where they would ask questions and the student would give back an answer. And one of the questions, this is documented, it says, like who spoke with the ass? Balaam the prophet. And then it goes, who was the first woman to commit adultery? And the answer is Eve with the serpent. Now, how do you like that?
Yeah, that's and you say 4th century, right? Or very early.
Documented from the Celtic Church in Britain by a guy Leslie Hardinger. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and see, like even the Targums, which is I published a copy of the Targums, which was my 8th book. It also speaks about this in great detail. And for people to say that this is all new and that we're reading into the text, it's my opinion that those that formed the first and the early church, and especially the disciples of Christ, they absolutely knew this as revelation and held it as discernment. And it was only later that it got corrupted, hidden, and forbidden.
Right, and really can be documented by 400 with Constantine, and the church was completely hijacked and infiltrated. Truth was thrown back to the ground. So,
right.
But here we are at the end of the age, and praise God, it's all coming out. But one of the things, and this is in the last hour, I'd like to really try to focus on this.
Yes, please do.
On the north, why the understanding the two houses of Israel is absolutely essential, and how you will never understand the Old Testament. Now, then I want to say this, my last comment about the keys and everything. Some of the Hebraic scholars will say that the book of Revelation even has over 72 sod, and what I mean by like hidden, encrypted esoteric meanings that unless you know those, the whole book is just a big mystery. I don't even teach out. I don't even feel like I'm ready to go into Revelation yet. I mean, that thing is so heavily encoded.
Right.
It's crazy. But this knowledge, you don't have to encrypt a lot of this understanding. I mean, you can read Shakespeare, Milton, even a couple even later writers would always talk about the bad seed. That's a very common literary term in literature. Mm-hmm. And we just think they were talking about bad apples, but these people really had an understanding of quote-unquote bad seed. So when most of our Bible, especially when it got whittled down to the 66, because we know now the King James originally had the Apocrypha and the Deuterocanicals.
Right.
Really in the last 130 years, there's been such an amazing dumbing down of the church. But be that as it may. But what I wanted to just start with was this kind of Hebraic understanding that the world, and this is the whole typology from Genesis, the whole idea of 6 days man works and the seventh day a day of rest, but that a day of the Lord is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is as a day. That is established, and I've done a whole teaching on this on YouTube. It's absolutely established that the 6,000 years a day is used as 1,000 years. So 6,000 years of Adamic history, all the ancients understood, our patriarchs, that this thing would wrap up at the end of 6,000 years.
Right.
That's what First Peter was saying. Don't think this is going on forever, because it has. So we know we're definitely at 6,000, and then people are beginning to unpack. My husband especially has such an understanding. There's a lot of research on the Shemitahs and the Jubilees, which is another whole way of God's counting. So those are being put back together, and those point to even we're so in the season this year. Jonathan Kahn, that's his whole understanding too. We are coming up on the last 120th Jubilee.
Yes.
And all this information. So there's and the blood moons, you throw all that in, and oh my God.
Daniel's timeline too. You've heard of that? The whole teaching.
Yeah.
Yes. And so to me, that's all confirmation as to what we're talking about. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but what I want to say is, so they in Hebrew thought the world existed for the first 2,000 years was a time of desolation. See, and this is the word, you understand the word idle and the word desolation really mean the same thing. This was a time of great desolation of the seed line. So many times, with the flood, we know that the seed was decimated, and you only had Noah, and then by the time of Nimrod again, they got right back to it. So God's, and I say as a great tactician, his next move was to call out, because it can be proven then, and you know this, that the seed line, that our patriarchs from Adam to Seth to Enoch to Noah to Abraham, they all had the books. They all had the understanding. Right. They all had this secret, this esoteric understanding, but they all knew the storyline, and it was passed down through the priesthood, through the firstborn, and all this. But when God, in the next 2,000 years, they call it, is when the Torah flourished. That's when God called out Abraham, and then you fast forward into the call of Moses, and you fast forward into the children now of Israel, where he is calling out a nation. And he's doing this 2,000 years, he's doing a whole different sort of thing, where he is repopulating the earth with so much, and this is what I said, it's called Yah's seed. The seed of Abraham in Hebraic idioms is called Yah's seed, because, see, a lot of this is a numbers game, because that iron mixed with clay, Daniel talks about, that's a whole kind of veiled Canaanite reference of that seed line trying to infiltrate.
Right. Well,
Yah's seed is doing the same thing. So that's becoming this huge, this is the salt. Because you are the salt of the earth that preserves. This seed line that God created through Sarah and Abraham has gone out into all the earth, and it has multiplied, and it has been a huge preservant. We have to understand this, but he did very specific things when he kind of channeled it a little bit more through Isaac, and then through the 12 tribes,
and this is all in line of keeping a healthy balance, like a healthy seed. You take your best stock if you're into horticulture. You take your best stock and you try to protect it and keep it. And this verbiage that God's constantly using about the agricultural, I call it the agricultural parabolic language, speaks a lot about this. It speaks about the vine that God planted, but it also, and especially in the Gospel of Thomas, which you quoted earlier, talks about a vine that was planted, by the enemy, and that's the vine, that's the root that has to be plucked out. That's what's got to go by. So anyway.
Yeah, the whole wheat and the tares. And also we have to remember that Noah was spared because he was pure in his generations. Yeah, his genetics was about the last, untainted. And I love trying to unpack, and we could do another whole show on that because I do have some comments into the whole trying to figure out how that seed line, crossed over the flood. Yes. Nehemiah and all that book we were talking about earlier, the writings of Abraham. That's all great stuff. But my point that I want to make, and this is what the Gentile Christian today does not understand. This is an understanding that has been brought really into the church by our Messianic brothers who come out of Judaism, who understand the two houses. I mean, they never lost their history. We, on the other hand, have completely lost who we are and what, as part of all Israel, and I call it the greatest identity theft. I mean, the fact that he could take this knowledge from us is so amazing. But when people need to understand something about history with the nations, then, when God called them and he cleaned up them at Mount Sinai, I believe genetically he just kind of went through them seed. I mean, I believe I have to say this, I have this whole understanding of dualism. When God finally got me, and I feel like with quantum physics, we can really understand this now, and this is some of the cutting edge of a lot of the commercials. A lot of people, the New Agers, are beginning to understand this way more than the church is, that there are forces out there. It's a concept of matter and forces that make up all of creation. So right, just like the poem that I opened with. Yes. This is exactly, because I was listening, I was going, we need to understand more. There are two seeds that can be germinated, one in the mind and one, and this is why Jesus said, for out of the heart, which is a code word, so for our DNA, out of our heart, our innermost being, come, murders, thefts, adulteries, and fornication, these things, if you act on them. Right, exactly. But this concept of dualism, when I finally understood that, then the whole Bible, after the seed lines, and then I got understanding of dualism, and the whole thing fell into place. Because seriously, then, on the highest level of this thing, understanding, God is running two computer programs at the same time. I can't put it any other way. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, there are two things going on at the same time. Right. But we won't even go there tonight. But anyways. We'll do a follow-up, so don't feel like you have to rush. Just cover what you can. Okay, thank you. I thank you for that. You're welcome. Now, this is what is interesting. In the history of the nation, they became a divided kingdom. And this is where most Bible prophecy teachers, whatever, totally miss it. Right after Solomon, because of his, falling away, God said, I will not take the kingdom away in your generation, but in your sons, I'm going to take the kingdom away. And he did it through the players, Jeroboam and Rehoboam, the northern kingdom of Israel, and the southern kingdom got into this whole thing, and I won't even give the whole story, but they divided. They had civil war, and they literally divided and became two kingdoms. So you had now the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and they had their own kings, they had their own governments, they started to have their own prophets. God would send different, see, this is why Elijah was a prophet in the northern kingdom. Isaiah was a prophet, even though he understood and prophesied. Hosea was a prophet to the northern kingdom. And so what I'm saying is the two kingdoms, the one kingdom got divided into two kingdoms. They started to have two kings, two governments, two prophets, two sets of destinies.
And this is where it gets interesting, because God does work all things together for good. And in the northern kingdom's apostasy was this hidden plan to use them, even in their fallen nature, as this dispersed seed, the way to get his seed, Yah's seed, these people, out into the nations, intermingling and getting that seed into all of the earth. And it's been going on now for over almost 3,000 years. And this is why if anybody does their, does a geno test, to find out, they'll find out they're all from people groups all over the map. Most people are, because there's been so much intermingling and marriage, of people groups shifting all over the earth. So this seed now, because that's what God said to Abraham, I will make you, a great man, a great nation, but a multitude of nations and a multitude of kings will come out of you.
Right. Hey,
so,
Liz, I want to give you a comment too, so you can incorporate this into what you're flowing into. There was a question from the chat room as to what about the Khazarian Jews and the state of Israel in the end times. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And you can when you understand the concept of infiltration and the synagogue of Satan, and yes, nothing is pure today.
Right. I mean, Revelation 2:9, 3:9, those who say they are Jews but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. All right, go ahead.
So, okay. But what's important to understand is so that has happened. So when Bible scholars are trying to figure out prophecy for the end times, if they don't understand that a prophecy by a prophet was made to the house of Judah, which Zechariah is full of, and starts applying it, it won't make sense. See, this is why they can't put it together. It's very confusing. But you have to read the Old Testament with an understanding of who the house of Israel, because after this separation, every time a prophet spoke to the house of Israel, he's talking to a whole different demographic group than what we consider to be Israel today, which is the Jews. So people have to understand the house of Judah was in the parable of this is how the Hebrews define the parable of the lost, what do they call it? The parable of the lost son, the prodigal son.
Yes.
Yeah. The older brother is Judah. Is the house of Judah that kind of stayed in the house. They stayed loyal to the covenant, so to speak. They kept practicing that Sabbath. They kept doing the thing. And then you have the prodigal son, which they understand that's the whole parable of the northern kingdom, who just went off and spent their inheritance and just totally lost it out there in the world. That's what that parable really means. Okay. So what happened? This is because for American prophecy, this is what people need to understand. We are, and I'll jump to my conclusion. And our early forefathers understood this, and we have a ton of writings and documents that prove that they understood this. They call it British Israelism, but it's so much bigger than that then. And I will tell you one thing to caution anyone who wants to read into the two house websites, because there's tons of stuff out there. Anybody who tries to make this elitist or racist is totally of the other side, the bad seed. Because God is not an elitist and he is not a racist. Right. And this has nothing to do with any of that.
That's a tactic.
That's a tactic, and we just got to nail it. I just am going to nail it right up front. I'm not promoting any racist sites or anything that people have no understanding. So
I get the same thing, Liz, because people try to say that anything to do with the seed of the seed of the serpent, or that Cain was a child of the devil, that all that is white supremacist, racist.
Right.
And they use that as a tactic to not only to attack me and to belittle the messenger, but also to corrupt the message and keep people from looking at the information.
Right. So, we just can say that right up front. But, Satan, we just not to be ignorant of his devices. So.
Right.
But the thing is, when the 12, so the promise went to Abraham, went to Isaac. See, because this is now when God really showed me, when Moses walked into Pharaoh's court and said, because we're going to do this too soon, Zen, this is the thing. But in Babylon's court, we're going to walk in and we're going to say, no, Israel is my son, is the firstborn. Israel is the firstborn. and let my people go. The thing is, when Moses had an understanding of this, when Jacob gave the blessing. See, because we have no understanding of what a birthright blessing is. This was the biggest deal in that culture today. It still is. The firstborn and the rights of the firstborn, and why Jesus is the firstborn, why these whole words are thrown around, and why they're important to understand. But Jacob, who inherited the name of Israel, God renamed him Israel. Okay? So now you have, which is Israel. God is El. El is one of the names for God. Jacob passed those blessings, those birthright blessings by the Holy Spirit, is the first, he divided it. So in the birthright blessing, there is what is called a blessing, and there is called a birthright. And both are usually, before that, they were always passed down to one of them. It came to Abraham, and then he passed it to Isaac. Jacob, through the Holy Spirit, and I believe a tactical move, divided it. So Judah, and he gave it to Judah, which became the house of Judah, which eventually morphed into the southern kingdom, and which is pretty much who the Jews today are. They got the birthright blessing, meaning the Messiah was going to come through them. That part of the blessing, that's called the Bekarah. It's a birthright, the scepter. Judah got the scepter, which means the kingship. The Messiah, the bloodline, was going to come through that, and that's who the Essenes were really protecting. The other half of the coin, the Barakah, which is the blessing, and that's the one that Esau really wanted, which is really interesting. That's the one that really kind of pissed him off. That is the material blessing, the wealth of land, offspring, and leadership. And I like to say, we have a phrase you probably heard, when God calls you, he will equip you. So when God called Abraham to be this seed of all these nations, he didn't say, I'm just going to send you out there, kid, and just go, do your thing. He said, no, I'm going to give you all the wealth and the prestige and the leadership, everything that you need to be my representative. So we got to understand how big this thing is. So what needs to be understood in this, and this explains so much then when people get this, when Jacob gave the birthright, the scepter to Judah, and then he turned around into Joseph, and it came down to Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who, by the way, were total pagan little Gentile Egyptian boys by his wife then, if you really follow this out, right? So God is always mixing. Anyways, that's a whole other story. He gives these blessings to Ephraim and Manasseh, and then he gives it to Ephraim, who actually is not the technical firstborn. That's the little story of the crossed hands. Right. Because God is always not really giving the firstborn birthright to the genetic firstborn. He's giving
Hold on, Liz.
Oh, you got to do this again?
I'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. Liz, before we continue on, if you'll provide your contact information again, where people can Facebook you or email you should they have questions, and also your YouTube channel again. And then don't forget about the question on the Khazarian Jews, State of Israel, and the end times.
Right, okay. Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. You just put my name in. It's Liz, and it's McGee, MC, capital G-E-E. It's called Prophecy for the Last Hour. So, yeah, love check out that. I have over 70 YouTubes, and I really go into depth on a lot of this stuff. I also have a Facebook. It's just, again, my name, Liz McGee, and I post sometimes my latest YouTubes and things on there. And I'm also coming out a little time with a brand new website for my artwork, which is going to be really kicked up, and I'd love for people to be able to check that out. So.
Which she's a fantastic artist, just to say.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Thank you. But just getting right back into it, Zen, I want to say this understanding, as I was telling about how the birthright was kind of divided, was a tactical move by God. When he gave, because when it's understood, it really explains America. Because sometimes we're sort of this anomaly, this unbelievably blessed nation at the end of the age. But it's not because we earned it or it's an entitlement thing. God is just true to his promises. And so we are reaping much of the promises of God for the tribes as they were dispersed. But one of the things, so when you understand that the blessing that was given to Joseph to provide for the move of God getting his, I call it his plan of salvation through the nations, he has used this dispersed seed in ways that they don't even know it, really, to be a blessing to the world. One of the things that needs to be understood in this, so then you had the 12 tribes, and they go on in their history, and they go into captivity, they come out, they have the kingdom, David becomes their king, and then at the time of Solomon, when it's divided, and one of the things, though, that Moses was very clear, when they covenanted together to be a nation, and God was very clear with them, if you obey me, you will have blessings. If you disobey me, you'll have to reap the curses, which in my opinion is just always say, if Satan gets the upper hand over you, this is what's going to result. But if you live under my blessings, it'll be honey, how it says, honey, and I forget what that little phrase is. But when you study out the history of the dispersed tribes, and you look at history, you can see both the blessings and the curses that we've all been walking under. This is the story of history to a large extent. But the thing that needs to be understood is these tribes, and now then so many people are unpacking this, can be tracked. As people begin to get a little leery of, quote unquote, the official line, even in history, and start to dig deeper, one of the most fascinating stories is, like you were talking about, the early life of Jesus, where it can be it's documented that his uncle Joseph of Arimathea was a very wealthy decaton, I think is the word for, in the Roman hierarchy. There, he was like a Carnegie of his day. There's just so much information. But anyways, he supplied the Romans, the armies, with the tin that they needed for a lot of their weaponry. He spent much of his time up in the British Islands. What people need to understand, when this people group, the Northern Kingdom was, and this is the whole point in Hosea, Lord really did just divorce them. In terms, they had become such spiritual harlots, such a quote unquote like adulterers, such of the covenants, that he just said, that's it, I'm just going to divorce you and send you out. Like, this is the whole parable of the divorced woman who gets sent out. But in God's mind, he was going to use that for good. They forgot who they were. They got so dispersed into the nations, they lost their identity. But many of them, and even the Colburn Bible, then I think some of these people groups, some of these things that are coming out, it's so interesting, who have retained a lot of this history and understanding. The whole history of the islands of the sea being Britain and Ireland and Scotland, and again, you can even extends to Australia and New Zealand and even down into South America. There are certain gates of the enemies there where the seed went to. This can be tracked now pretty accurately. There are some people that are digging so deep into this and recovering, because again, you just can't believe what you read in your history text. They just lie.
Right.
How the tribes went out and dispersed, but by and large, these were a clanal people, very tribal people. They did leave, through the Assyria, up through the Balkans, I think are the mountains there, up into Europe, up into Northern Europe, up into the islands of the sea, which would be Britain, Scotland, and over into America. That is a primary migration route that can be tracked. And this is a fascinating study. of the heraldry, you can track it, because heraldry does not lie, of these peoples continuing to keep their emblems from the tribes of Israel, tracking this. So you have written in the monarchy, I think Dr. Joyce got a lot of, the lion, the unicorn, all this is all their iconology from their true Hebraic history. But in the meantime, they're intermingling with all the indigenous peoples, and that's another whole story in itself.
Right.
But what we need to understand, so then you get fast forward to the time of America and our discoveries. See, there was always prophesied and promised that there would be not two things. One, another place. This is something people have to wrap their minds around. We're so fixated on the land over there, and that little geographic plot the size of Rhode Island. And when you understand the keys a little more of God's plan, he says, the earth is mine and the fullness of them. When he is making a new earth, a new heaven, a new earth, it's the whole earth. We're going to inherit the whole earth. We really don't need to be fighting over a little plot of land over there. That's really where you get into the whole synagogue of Satan and how they're using our ignorance of Bible prophecy to kind of use as a conflagration.
And how you're right, because they are using that piece of land and the control of it to incite the controlled opposition between the Muslim nations and the Christian nations, which back Israel. But it's all contrived, and they're controlling both sides, just as America funds the terrorists, like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. They fund Hamas and a lot of the Muslim Brotherhood and things of that nature. So it's all controlled opposition.
It's all controlled. But the thing about the Muslims, they're gonna bite the bait big time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's the
the whole world is right now.
Yeah, that's the problem. But there's a piece of this puzzle or a piece of the story that's not really being told and emphasized in Bible prophecy, and that's the whole point. The tares are planted and they grow, and because he said that they're gonna, the wheat and the tares are gonna grow together. So you just have to assume wherever there's wheat and tares growing together. So in our country, so back to my point though about America, we represent, and this is our birthrights, and this is what we need to understand. This is the coat of many colors that just it. We are a people that now represent the redeemed of Israel in the world today. People who can get now. We represent. See, there's a difference. What we represent, it doesn't mean that we are all of the redeemed Israel. You know what I'm saying? The seed is all over the world. But we represent the governmental seat of authority that is given to us by Yah to be his representatives on the earth with the blessing. And when we come together with our brother Judah and understand the birthright, when they understand that the Messiah did come, because, see, this gets into the whole idea with Messiah ben Joseph, who when he came the first time, Yeshua came as Messiah ben Joseph, and he came to find these lost sheep. See, this is what we've been living through 2,000 years of a messianic age, which the Jews saw, because this is where he was going after the lost sheep of the house of Israel. What people have to understand, just about the whole world has been infiltrated with the seed of the lost sheep. So this is God's brilliant plan to call anybody. It's not indigenous to one little people group anymore. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
It's everywhere. So anyone who responds to that can get grafted back in to what God has always been growing, which is a new heaven, the new Jerusalem, the new heaven and the new earth. So we get grafted back into the new man. But America in Bible prophecy, we are not Babylon. That's the biggest lie on the planet. Even though we have tons of Babylon in us, we are not Babylon. That is literally reserved back over in the land to the ancient city. That well is getting redug pretty deep, and it's about ready to explode on us. But we have a birthright that we need to reclaim and operate. Our wealth and our prestige in the world is not an entitlement. It is so that we can be a refuge. We can be a place of refuge out of the dragon's reach in the time of the Great Tribulation. So that anybody who can get here, because God always said he was going to have another place where both houses could live together in peace, safe from all of their enemies. And then there's no place else in the world where there's more Jews actually in America than there are over in the land. The house of Israel is here. We are here. And we need to just have this massive, knock upside the head, understand who we are, repent, massive repentance, and calling on Yahweh's name. We have to get rid of these terrors. We have to get these people out of our government. We just, I don't think it's going to be pretty per se, but, this has happened in Israel's history before when they had bad kings, but this is something that, in my opinion, and then you have to understand the prophecies to the house of Israel. And it wasn't, I don't think it's going to be totally pretty to get the tares out of here per se, but we will prevail. Yah's seed will prevail. And we will be, and those that are alive and remain when Messiah ben David comes back, which is Jesus in his second return as, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and then the gig is up. And then he's really going to bump heads together. Praise God. But this to me, understanding the two houses, you'll never rightly divide the word of God and apply the prophecies in their correct way if you don't understand this. So I hope that made some sense.
Yes. And I like that you're saying that it's not a particular nation, a particular people, or a particular color, or, a particular creed, because it's dispersed all through. And this is the way that I teach it as well, because, there's so many that try to get nationalistic, or that it's a particular specific people or a color of a people, but that, we're spread and dispersed everywhere. And so you can't define it concretely as such.
No, and this is why Joseph's coat of many colors. It represents every nation, tribe, tongue.
Yes.
What unites is our spiritual heritage. See, that's what we need. That's our unity, is that we are all children of Yahweh. And that's all we need. In the outward flesh, it means nothing. He says there's neither male nor female, bond nor free, slave. That stuff is all is of no account. What matters is that we are the spiritual seed and we have a birthright. And we need to start, repenting and the way we have just so in the prosperity gospel, like we think this blessing is for us to squander on our lusts. And, this is ridiculous.
Right.
So there's, this is something that really needs to be fleshed out and taught more and understood. And I believe it's one of the greatest revelations that's, on cutting edge, because, there's so many things like not all Israel is Israel. Like a lot of the natural, quote unquote, seed, the genetic seed aren't going to be in because they're not going to believe. They're going to be by unbelief. They're going to disqualify themselves. So it really doesn't have anything to do with, and that's why I say that you can't be elitist about it and you can't be racist about it.
Right.
So, and the last point is in unpacking this, the things that's so exciting to me when you begin to understand the keys, because then this is making me kind of rethink all of my quote unquote eschatology, because I think most of the eschatology is coming at us to make us fall into the trap of taking sides in the great conflagration that's about to erupt. This gets into the whole concept when you understand the two seed lines. It gets into the whole, and this is something I'd really like to unpack with you and show, of the mark of the beast and the Antichrist, what that could really be talking about. And as we get closer and closer and more revelation comes out, it says that we're children of the light. We're going to understand. We're not going to walk in darkness. And it says, Jesus, I totally believe Yeshua's prayer. We will be one. We will walk in complete truth, and nothing will be lacking among us in understanding. So I think what I'm trying to say is there's so much, but I don't. Most people, when they're taught the end times, they end up hand-wringing. The intent is to make people all fearful. Oh, I can't live in the day of tribulation. Oh, it's going to be so terrible. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think so. I think we're going to really turn the tide on this thing. And I think that's something that scares Satan, that knowledge and understanding. I think that really scares him. That's why he works so hard at suppressing the truth in this.
You know, for me, it doesn't matter what period and how much is going on. If you are of the sheep and you are of his people, you will have protection and you will have grace and you will be under his wing of authority. If you don't, you have nothing anyways. So, you know, I'm okay with tribulation. I'm okay with this being the end of days, the end of time, whatever. I just feel like if I'm under, you know, if I know him and I am truly living for the kingdom and prioritizing it, I've got nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. Sure, I take some emergency precautions and preparations and things of that nature, but I'm not sweating it. Really not.
Well, you see, I think this is the thing, because I think that there's going to be more a sense of, because we're walking right now into the millennium. We've had 2,000 years of the messianic era of the Lord gathering his lost sheep and Messiah ben Joseph, and providing for a level playing field, so to speak, so that he can get his plan of salvation throughout the nations, you know, with Satan not getting the upper hand and stopping that. I think that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out from here. But I'm leaning towards this idea that if you stay steadfast in the faith,
Yeah.
if you're alive and remain at his return, you know, we will just be changed. See, this gets into the concept of another whole thing of who the elect are. I think we touched on that one time, because
Yes.
I think that's a little bit of a different subset. The body of Christ, you know, because there is still a lot of murkiness about how this millennial transition happens, you know, other than Jesus comes back and he just, you know, with the breath of his coming destroys the devil. But so it's so parabolic, this how the transition happens and how we go into the millennium. But I think it's going to become more and more clear. And I think that because God is so good, the cities of refuge, that concept in the Old Testament, that America, I feel very strongly about this then, because Satan is just about ready to muster the armies of the world, to put that little country of Israel off the map. And he will succeed to a great extent. The remnant has to have a place to go. That's what's been promised to them. And I believe that that's America. I believe that we will have to get people out of there on a dime, as my prophecy goes forth. So I really believe that America, this idea of understanding those are our brothers. This is way bigger than just feeling for another people group. This is when you're a firstborn. Let me make this last point. This is what Abraham had to exercise when he had to go after Lot. It wasn't just that he, you know, liked his nephew. It was his absolute responsibility as the firstborn to raise an army and to protect and to go after those of his clan. It's not an option. When you're the firstborn and you have that part of the Barakah, you have your provision so that you can defend and protect yourself, you and yours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of like the father.
Yes.
The father
so,
figure and responsibility of that.
Responsibility. So it will be our absolute responsibility to protect the remnant in, I want to call it in Israel, over there in the land, you know, because I don't want to, it's not really all Israel. People say it's Israel, but it's really not, because Israel really is the scattered seed. So in our minds, we have to make this little transition. But I truly believe that we are the place prepared, that they will come here. And it's here, especially, that the two houses will come together. And, you know, Judah, it's just going to be amazing. It really is going to be amazing. So,
also, the people in power in Israel, in my opinion, are the Revelation 2:9-3:9, the synagogue of Satan, those who say they are Jews but are not. Which reminds me, in the last 2 minutes, can you comment on the Khazarian Jews and the Israel in the end times?
Yeah, one of the things is, there is the verse about the synagogue of Satan. Now, and infiltration is a very real thing. Now, is he talking? He's not talking about the Ashkenazi Jews. So these are this group is, which group is this again?
They are the Khazarian.
The Rothschild. I mean, is this that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, yeah. It's, first of all, Jesus said you'll know them by their fruit. So
right.
Even if you're confused about lineage, you can look at a person's fruit. So
exactly.
It doesn't really matter. But yes, I think these people are complete infiltrators, and it's so fascinating when you study out a lot of the, oh my gosh, that one Rothschild, they own unbelievable acreage in the Golan Heights. I mean, they've been planning this thing for a long time. This is part of the great work, you know.
Right.
So no, I believe that there is a total, but I don't. You got to look at this thing. There are many people that are in the know, but there's a lot of people that are just tools, and those are the people my heart goes out to, because
they've been deceived. They've been led astray.
That have been led astray, and so there's a lot of good Zionists
right.
that are trying to support, and I'm with them, and I understand it, but at the same time, we have to have more eyes open to understand how we're being so manipulated on all fronts by this very powerful elite.
Right. It's just like all the people that joined the military after the 9/11 attacks, thinking that they were going to go and, in performance for our country, patriotic duty. All right, Liz, we'll pick it up on another episode at another time. God bless all.
All right. Thank you, Zen. God bless you.